Hello everyone, and once again thanks for tuning in. In today's video, I guess we'd like to go over making the MFD bezels for the A-10 cockpit. As you know, the ones from Thrustmaster are actually 4-inch diagonal screens, where the real one is actually a 5-inch diagonal display. So we'll, I guess, look into some of the components we've used in making our homemade bezel. So we'll jump into that. And I guess before we do, we'll do a quick update about right where we left off last time. I have the simulation paused, so we'll go ahead and unpause it. And we were trying to line up on an approach to Batumi, and as you can see, you can try to steer and follow the command bars. Like right now we're a little bit above the glide slope, but if I nose down, we can recapture and turn to the left. We can try to keep the center. That's a little bit too much. But at any rate, you could attempt to follow the command steering bars to get yourself on course. And so we got the ADI pitch and roll channel wired up, and the next thing we're working on are the bezels, and we'll take a look at that now. So some of the components that I used to do and actually let me pause the sim real quick. Okay, so some of the components that we've used would be, if you go to the website grabcad.com, and if you do a search on MFD bezel for the F-16 Fighting Falcon, you'll find a bezel, an STP 3D file that you can use to print out your bezel by Carry. So you can locate that file and open it with your CAD tool. And what you want to do is you want to scale it, because the CAD file is actually this guy, but we want to size it so that it's a 5-inch bezel. So you'll scale it so that you'll end up with a 5-inch diagonal screen there. And then once you do that, you want to get some prototype PCB board, printed circuit board. I used 23 by 19 centimeter printed circuit board. That's actually something like this. And what you want to do, you want to get a fairly high quality board, such as this one right here. You don't want to use something that's too flimsy. Like this one is a little bit too flexible. So you want something a little bit more sturdier than this type. So once you get your printed circuit board, and once you get your bezel printed out, you'll just lay it on top and get a marker and trace the outer edge and the inner edge on your printed circuit board. So once you do that, you can use our trusty Dremel tool, like what we have here. You can use other stuff as well, like a hacksaw, but I probably recommend a Dremel tool. It'll be faster and probably a little bit easier to accomplish. And of course, we have our mask for the dust that it'll create, and also eye protection as well. So you want to get your prototype PCB board, your tactile push buttons, something similar to these here. This particular one, I used 24 gauge wire. That was actually probably a size too large. I had to cut away some of the edges there to get everything to fit, as you can see in some instances. The wires were a little bit large, so I probably recommend 26 to 28 gauge wire. Then I used 30 gauge solid wire, and I kind of use it as like lacing string. It's thin enough to where you could use it as a tie string, and I use that to kind of channel the wires on the sides of the buttons, and we'll go over that in a minute as well. Of course, we use some screws in the corner to hold the bezel to the printed circuit board. You know, you'll need some solder. Printed some 3D buttons. Of course, your standard wire strippers and wire cutters, things like that. So what you'll end up with when you're starting out here, so it like this. So you'll mount your tactile push buttons along the printed circuit board, and you'll solder your wires, and in my case, I just have it long enough to reach the nearest Arduino chip I'll be using to drive it. So that's why in this case they're a little bit extra long. And as I mentioned before, we'll route the wires along the edge, and we'll use some lacing string, or you can use 30 gauge solid wire, and tie it so that the wires run along the sides of the push buttons there. And just as a quick note as well, when you're wiring your switches, I have a little sketch here. So one thing that we've done, of course, you'll have, this is only showing just a concept, but of course you have well over 25 buttons per bezel. But the thing to note here is we've used something like in this particular case, it'll vary depending on what lighted tactile push buttons you have, but we just have a resistor here, and we have a resistor on each of the lighted push buttons. And as you notice, we have two grounds that you want to, if possible, keep separate. You have your lighting ground that is used to light the push buttons, and you have your digital ground that you use for your push buttons, so that when the button closes, the Arduino sees the ground going into the Arduino as a digital input. So excuse me, when you're wiring your assemblies, it's always a good idea to separate your lighting ground from your digital ground. And this is just a sample circuit to demonstrate how we keep the two grounds separate. So that may save you some headaches in the future. So that's pretty much it. We start with cutting out our printed circuit board. We'll end up printing the 3D bezel, and once you route your wires, this will go on top. But of course, we insert our push buttons here. We just drop these inside, and for example, drop another button in. So you'll lay inside all of your push buttons, and you kind of hold them and you put this on top. And once you do that, they'll remain captive, you know, as such. And the end result, what you're looking for, is just a something similar to this. And of course, we've also used a 3-position rotary switch for the on-off. And you can kind of see the wiring for that here. And that was pretty much it. Just wanted to go over that, making the MFD bezels. One thing of note, I used glow in the dark or glow type filament, and due to the thickness of this button and that green LED, it's pretty much, how do you say, it doesn't transmit the light. So I probably would recommend translucent filament, or have somebody print you out some 3D buttons using acrylic. Maybe you can contact a particular company, maybe such as PCFlights.com. Their buttons are acrylic. That'll give you a better glow in the dark result than using this. So at any rate, that was pretty much it, and just wanted to share that with you. And thanks for watching, and good luck with your cockpits.